Thank you very much for that introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd also like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak here. So these are my more extended affiliations, and these are my disclosures. So you've heard already this afternoon in great detail that the nomenclature for NASH or fatty liver has been changed, so that now we should be talking about MASLD or MASH instead of NAFLD and NASH. Now, of course, we've been familiar with fatty liver for many years. We've had this as a delicacy, a French delicacy, which we all like to eat, yeah? Maybe it's popular here in Vietnam. Now, you're probably very familiar with how this is produced. You know, we have to force feed geese with carbohydrate. So it's easy to produce fatty liver, isn't it? Pretty easy in the goose. Now, if you look at this gentleman who's feeding the goose, he looks a bit overweight, maybe. So perhaps he's also got fatty liver. But he's not being force-fed, I guess. I mean, he is feeding himself voluntarily. So I sort of thought, well, maybe we shouldn't call it MASLD or NAFLD. We might call it brain-associated fatty liver, because it's a conscious decision to make your liver fatty, is it? Baffled is an English word, not spelt like that, but meaning confusing. Confusing. So that's another way of looking at steatotic liver disease. Now, as you've heard, the steatotic liver disease is associated with lipid disorders, and typically with high circulating triglycerides. But we're not suggesting that high triglycerides cause the liver fat. I mean, the two are associated, but not causally. And there are various things that increase blood triglycerides. Of course, alcohol, adiposity. It's associated with fatty liver disease, and it's obviously associated with diabetes and excess fat everywhere. So, I mean, this condition we might consider as the metabolic syndrome. High triglycerides, elevation of liver enzymes, elevation of HbA1c, and it will improve. It will improve with weight loss if you can get your patients to lose weight. That really is the primary treatment. And I think we see in some patients who gain weight rather rapidly that they suddenly develop all these manifestations of the fat being deposited and spilling over into the liver, in the muscle, even in the pancreas, and also causing heart disease. So obviously, the primary lifestyle treatment is weight reduction, particularly in the overweight patients with fatty liver disease, and even in the non-obese ones, a little bit of weight reduction will help. And then these usual lifestyle interventions, certain recommended foods, certain foods to avoid, and obviously aerobic activity and resistant exercise will be useful. Now, it's interesting when we're talking about the relationship between fatty liver and lipids, because there are certain lipid diseases that cause fatty liver. And again, you've heard about those, A-beta-lipoproteinemia or hypo-beta-lipoproteinemia, where there is loss of function of the genes for microsomal triglyceride transfer protein, or the ApoB gene. Now, people with those genetic defects cannot take fat out of the liver because those proteins are needed to produce VLDL. And there's also lysosomal acid lipase deficiency and familial partial lipodystrophy, which is often associated with very high triglycerides, also with fatty liver. And lysosomal acid lipase deficiency has a spectrum of presentation. In infants, it can present as Wallmann's disease with rapidly progressive liver failure. But in older children and adults, it may present with what's termed cholesterol ester storage disease. And this may look like typical MASLD or MASH, or more like the diabetic dyslipidemia, high triglycerides, low HDL. We can also precipitate fatty liver by certain lipid treatments. The treatments that inhibit the output of VLDL from the liver, mipomersen and lomitapide, and then a new treatment which was in development but now stopped, vupanorsen. So if we look at mipomersen, mipomersen was developed for homozygous familial hypercholesterolemia. It's an antisense oligonucleotide that gets into the liver, stops the liver producing ApoB, and prevents the output of VLDL particles. And so if you don't put out VLDL, you retain the triglyceride in the liver. And lomitapide does the same thing, but inhibiting a different protein here. Lomitapide is approved for homozygous familial hypercholesterolemia. It's very expensive for a small molecule oral treatment. And the other interesting one was vupanorsen, which was being developed to inhibit angiopoietin-like protein 3. And it was sort of forecast to be very effective in a wide range of conditions. But in these patients who were treated with statin, it had a very good effect on ANGPTL3, the blue bars here, and a good effect on triglycerides, but not much effect on non-HDL and LDL, and it increased liver fat. So not all the treatments, all the new treatments in development, particularly those affecting ANGPTL3, are going to be that useful. So what are the other targets that we can aim for to reduce the fat in the liver? Well, obviously the obesity, the weight loss, and the obesity treating drugs, certain anti-diabetic medications, as you've heard, certain treatments to modify lipids or other metabolic modulators which are in development. Now, you've heard about the GLP-1 receptor agonists in a lot of detail already, and I don't want to repeat all that. But nowadays, we have other agonists, not only for GLP-1, but for also GIP and glucagon itself. So we have the GLP-1 agonists up here. We have the dual agonist GLP-1 and GIP, the dual agonist GLP-1 and glucagon, and the triple agonist, which is in a late stage of development. So we can look at each of these different combinations and see how they affect metabolism and how they are well tolerated or not. Now again, as you've seen, the healthy liver can progress to MASLD and to MASH and then to cirrhosis. And it's important if you're treating these sort of intermediate situations to make sure that reducing the fat content of the liver doesn't increase the fibrosis content of the liver, which would be potentially harmful. So these were some of the treatments which were available. This is a review paper which has been quoted repeatedly during this session. These were the treatments available last year. So vitamin E, not approved for anything by the FDA. Pioglitazone, approved for type 2 diabetes. Liraglutide, approved for type 2 diabetes and obesity. And they do seem to have some effect on NASH, as it was called then, certain clinical benefits, but certain adverse effects. Of course, with pioglitazone, if you use it in patients with diabetes, they do tend to have fluid retention and have a high risk of heart failure. And the other ones which were available last year, semaglutide, indicated for diabetes and obesity, tirzepatide, indicated for diabetes and SGLT2 inhibitors, indicated for diabetes. And of course, they're also indicated for heart failure and chronic kidney disease without diabetes. So if we look at a patient with MASH and certain comorbidities, we have to think about the comorbidities. And one of the major comorbidities, of course, is cardiovascular disease. And so most patients with NASH will have some risk of cardiovascular disease. So we should use statins. Are statins safe? There's a lot of publications on the safety or potential benefit of statins, but I think on balance they don't really reduce the fat in the liver, but they are safe to use unless the patient has decompensated cirrhosis. Now, if we look at patients who also have diabetes, then we should think about pioglitazone, or nowadays the GLP-1. And if the patient doesn't have diabetes, then we could think about vitamin E, although the benefit, I think, is rather limited. And there are all these different alternatives in development. And of course, the one at the top, resmetirom, has now been approved by the FDA this year. So we do have this new treatment. And there are various other different approaches, the ones affecting glucose metabolism, the ones affecting PPAR modulators, and so on. So let's look at the newest treatment which has been approved. I expect it's not available here in Vietnam, and I believe it's very expensive. So it won't be used widely for a long time, maybe. But it looks really impressive. It does improve MASH with no worsening of fibrosis. It actually improves fibrosis. So it's got a lot of beneficial effects. And if you think about it, this is a thyroid hormone mimetic. And we've been using thyroid hormone inappropriately, in a way, to reduce body weight for many years. But now we can use it to improve the liver fat. And it seems to work in various different ways. But it's an interesting molecule. This is resmetirom up here, and you can see it has some similarity to thyroxine, but doesn't have any iodine in it. And one of the benefits is that it increases the metabolism of fatty acids and really breaks down the fatty acids and eliminates them as carbon dioxide through respiration. So you're getting rid of all this fat, and it's not going anywhere harmful, unless you think it's polluting the environment. And resmetirom has some remarkable effects on lipids. So if you look at the effects here, this was from the phase 2 study, but a good reduction in LDL cholesterol, good reduction in triglycerides, good reduction in ApoB, even a reduction in lipoprotein A, little a. So it looks very promising, and they are doing a sort of follow-up study from the fatty liver study to show whether it has any outcome benefit. Now, the other ones which are being looked at are semaglutide, which you've heard about. I won't dwell on that. It shows a benefit. And then the newer one, tirzepatide, again, the dual agonist, increasing doses have increasing effect on reducing the MASH, but no worsening of fibrosis. And then the most recent one, the triple agonist, retatrutide, this is remarkable in reducing body weight. It's remarkable in reducing fat in this subgroup of patients. This is just a subgroup analysis of the main obesity treatment with retatrutide, so it wasn't specifically designed to look at fatty liver, and the degree of fat was not very high. So if I can move forward, which I can't. Can I advance the slide? Oh, you're going backwards. Go forwards. Go the other way. I had come to the end. I was just... Oh, okay, I can use this one. All right, so I'm just about to make the conclusion. There are more options available now to treat the metabolic associated fatty liver disease, although not readily available, I would say. If you have a drug like semaglutide available, that will be very effective in overweight patients. Resmetirom really looks very promising, but maybe not widely available and maybe very expensive, but we have to wait and see. Yeah, so thank you very much for your attention.